So, developer relations, what is it, how does it work, and why on earth should you care? Well, let's dig in. Alrighty, welcome. I hope you're safe and well wherever you may be. So today I'm going to be talking about a very important demographic of people that it seems like everybody wants to talk to, and that is developers, okay? Now, before I get into what DevRel is all about and how it works, I want to talk about why people are interested in talking to developers. And there's basically three main reasons, okay? 1, 2, 3. So the first one is the business of doing business. More and more companies are becoming software companies, okay? They're delivering software and services to their team members that they need to do their business, but also they're creating services that are on the cloud, or they're creating mobile apps. So increasingly companies are hiring technical staff to come in and build out these technical services, and therefore companies want to sell their products and services to those technical people, okay? The second reason why developers are important is influence, okay? And that is that in the old days, people would use CIOs and CTOs to primarily make decisions about technology. But these days, what happens is companies are hiring developers, and these developers are going to meetups and virtual events and reading Hacker News and reading technical websites. And they're coming to work and saying, hey, I've just tried using this really cool tool, and I think we should use it for the company. And that's carrying a lot of weight because they've got the technical kudos to kind of back it up, okay? So that's another reason why developers are important. But also, developers are kind of a broad bucket, okay? And what I mean by this is that when we talk about developers and developer relations, we're not typically just talking about, for example, front-end developers who write code that powers the front end of a website, or back-end developers who are writing code that powers the back end of a website, but we're also talking about data scientists and AR developers and VR developers, and we're talking about DevOps and DevSecOps and all of these different kind of subcategories, okay? And developer relations staff usually focus on having conversations with those technical audiences, but this provides a little bit of a dilemma, my friend, and that is around this, and I've got the suitably red pen, around marketing, okay? Surely the marketing people should be doing all of this stuff, right? The marketing people, the experts when it comes to talking to the market, right? Well, part of the reason why DevRel has kind of sprung up is because there's a perception out there that you can't really market towards developers, and that the typical tools of marketing, such as email nurture and paid advertising and newsletters and things such as that, don't really work with developers. Well, I call bullshit on that viewpoint, because those tools and techniques absolutely do work with developers. However, the critical point here is that you need to speak to developers like developers. If you start using all of your marketing buzzwords and lingo, it's going to fall on pretty flat ears, okay? So that's one of the reasons why marketing historically has struggled in engaging with developers, and why developer relations as a separate entity has kind of sprung up, okay? So what I want to do, first of all, is clean up my mess here. And in this video, what I want to cover are three main elements of how DevRel works, so you can figure out how it's going to work for you, okay? So the first thing we're going to cover is the value, okay? What is the value that DevRel brings to the world? The second is going to be, what on earth do they do? And then the third is, what are the skills, whoops, getting ahead of myself, what are the skills that DevRel people should bring to the table? So value, what do they do, and what are the skills that they bring, okay? So let's first of all talk about the value. Now, there's two primary buckets of value that DevRel primarily brings to the table. And the first one is awareness, okay? That's an E. DevRel people do a great job of going out there and banging the drum and getting people excited about a particular developer platform. So let's say this is a database. We want developers to start using this database, okay? Well, DevRel people will go and speak at conferences and virtual events. They'll create content. They'll go on podcasts. They'll go on YouTube channels. They'll be doing a lot of social media, and they won't just do a lot of the outreach, but they'll also be engaging and responding and building a relationship around, that value proposition of that database with that developer audience. And that kind of leads to the second point, which is engagement. Okay? with traditional marketing, it's very broadcast in nature, right? You create an ad and put it on Facebook, and that broadcasts out to the people on Facebook, and hopefully people on Facebook will click on the ad and go and check out what you're advertising. Or you create a social media message. A lot of marketers will just put it out on social media, or you'll do a webinar, you'll just present to an audience. Well, the key differentiator with developer relations is that there needs to be a response to that motion, okay? So if I'm a DevRel person and I go and do a talk at a conference, then people come and speak to me after the talk, then I'll follow up with them, I'll engage with them, maybe get their email address, follow up and send them some documentation or some technical samples. But there's a two-way process that's involved in that, and that's what people want, right? Nobody wants to just be broadcast to. It's one of the reasons why broadcast television has been dying in recent years, and why people are getting their content and material from places like YouTube, okay? It's because people want that two-way relationship with creators, and therefore developers want a two-way relationship with the companies that they're engaging with, okay? So awareness and engagement is what the value is all about. Now, in terms of what DevRel people actually primarily do, I'm going to break this down into 8. I'm just wanting to double check my notes. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, there's kind of 8 key pieces of value, but not all DevRel people do this. The seventh, and the 8th are what I feel like they should be doing, which I want to get to because I think it's really important. Okay, now the first thing that they tend to do is evangelism. Okay. So they get out there and they generate this awareness, okay? And this in itself is a huge skill, right? Being a great speaker or a great writer and getting out there and really weaving a narrative and a story around this database, for example, or this technology that you're out there promoting, okay? Not everybody's good at this. Not everybody can do this very well, okay? It requires a certain kind of personality and a certain set of skills to do that. And there are some amazing DevRel people out there who do this. I mean, like any profession, there's also some pretty terrible people out there who do it as well, okay? But fundamentally, they get out there and they're personable people who can deliver a personable message to an audience and get some kind of traction, okay? Now, this is one of the reasons why in many cases, developer relations will also be known as developer evangelism, okay, or community evangelism or community advocacy, for example, is that it varies on title, but fundamentally that's probably one of the most critical elements of what developer relations folks do, all right? Now, the second piece, which is kind of tightly integrated here, is content, okay? And that is that they'll typically generate a whole bunch of content as well. So this is going to be blogging, podcasting, YouTube. There's often a lot of live streaming done by DevRel folks. There'll be social media content generated. There may be infographics and things like that. And generally when people are looking for DevRel folks, they're looking for a mixture of evangelism and content. Now, some companies, especially larger companies, will split this and they'll have dedicated content creation staff and they'll have dedicated evangelism staff. But most smaller companies are actually looking for, my mic keeps falling down. Most smaller companies are looking for somebody to have both ideally in their skill set, all right? Now, the third piece here that they focus on is leads. Now, this is really important, right? When we think of leads in a marketing sense, typically that's bringing people into your universe, handing them over to the sales team, and then the sales team close those leads, and that's how the sale is made. However, in DevRel, typically leads are people who are attending webinars, people who are downloading the free version of your product, people who are using your open source project, okay? It's not necessarily sales leads. In fact, in most cases, it's not sales leads, okay? So you've got to be very careful, especially if you're a company and you're hiring DevRel folks, to not conflate leads from a marketing group and leads from a DevRel group, because they are very, very different. If you treat your DevRel leads like you treat your marketing leads, you're going to start frustrating a bunch of developers, because no developer wants to get into a sales funnel, okay? That's just not the culture of how developers tend to operate, okay? So leads is basically trackable interest in something that you're doing. People who register for a webinar, people who download your open source project and use it, people who go to your events, people who attend your meetups, people who join your forum, for example, all right? Now, the fourth piece here is around brand, okay? A lot of DevRel people will be really focused on not just performing the evangelism and getting content out there and generating leads and interest, but they'll be kind of arbiters for the brand, okay? And brand isn't just logos and colors and stuff like that. Sure, that's one part of it, and DevRel people will often have input on kind of the logo design and the visual aesthetic of a community or a visual aesthetic of a product. But brand is tonality, it's style, it's It's how classy you are in how you engage with people. It's how creative and interesting you are. And that's all about brand. And that kind of ties quite neatly into the visual brand, but also the tonality and the kind of the voice of the project, okay? DevRel people are examples of that. If you've got a great DevRel person goes and they do a presentation at a conference, and not only is the content interesting and it's technically relevant and it solves a real problem, but they deliver it in a way that's funny and dynamic, but respectful and collaborative, that all reflects really well on your brand. But if you get somebody who's not good at that, well, be careful. That's all I'm going to say. All right. Now, the other one here is partners. Okay. I'm going to cover this slightly. I'm going to be quick about this because this is not a huge chunk of DevRel for most DevRel people that I know, but it certainly is a piece of this where, if you're out there as a DevRel person, you're doing your evangelism, the content and the leads and working with, generating this kind of brand perspective, people are going to come up to you and say, hey, could we partner on a webinar or partner on an event, or could we partner on a piece of content or something along those lines? Or if you have a company that you're doing business with, you might want to partner with as well. So a lot of DevRel people will be intimately involved in that partnership. Okay. But bear in mind that this is different to commercial partners, okay? The strategic partners, that's a whole different kettle of fish, all right? And then the final one in terms of the core pieces here is feedback, okay? Your DevRel folks, or if you're a DevRel person, are going to be really involved in getting amazing feedback from developers, okay? Invariably, your DevRel folks, anyone who's worth their salt, is going to be very involved in not just raising awareness and the evangelism around your technology, but also hearing what the response was and hearing what the developer thought of it and what their feedback was, and then channeling that feedback back into the engineering team, into the product team, to the executive team, to the marketing group, okay? DevRel people are a sponge for this kind of feedback, and part of the skill of a good DevRel person is taking a lot of feedback from a lot of different places, condensing it down into a set of useful bits of information that they can communicate effectively to the team, and doing it in a way that's really thoughtful and sensitive, right? Because sometimes developers are going to use your technology and they're going to say it sucks, okay? And just going into the company and saying they all think it sucks, that's not a constructive conversation. So DevRel people sometimes have to be a little bit political in how they kind of couch that feedback and communicate it in the most constructive and effective way back into the company, all right? So just to recap at this point, DevRel people generate a lot of awareness. They engage with an audience in kind of an interactive manner. In terms of what they do, they perform evangelism, they generate content, they generate leads, but again, not the same as marketing leads. They go out and represent the brand. They work with partners. That looks like partners. That's a T. And they bring in feedback, okay? But there's two things that not all DevRel people do that they absolutely should be doing. And this is really, really important, okay? The seventh piece here is onboarding. One of my pet peeves is when companies go and do a whole load of evangelism and create loads of content and make a big noise about a really cool piece of technology and people love it. And then they come in and a warm lead comes in to start using your product for the first time. And then the onboarding sucks. It's too difficult to kind of get up and running. The documentation's terrible. There's no decent API docs. There's no getting started guide. There's no place for them to go and get help and answer questions. It's just a nightmare to get up and running. Now, the tricky thing is that often that developer experience in terms of the onboarding piece isn't really owned by certain teams in a company, right? Sometimes the engineering team are not necessarily owning that. Sometimes the product team is not owning that because sometimes it's part of a community experience. Your DevRel people should be your eyes and ears when it comes to ensuring that onboarding experience is great, because when they get that feedback from developers and they say, your documentation sucks, or there's no place where I can go and ask questions, that should then feed back into the company and optimize the onboarding experience. Okay, so this is really important. Okay, if I was hiring a DevRel person, I'd be asking them about that right out the gate. How do you approach making sure that people get onboarded as quickly and as easy as possible? And then the eighth one here, and the final one, in terms of what they do, should be community. Okay. There are some DevRel people who love doing the evangelism and love generating the content and getting out on the road and doing social media and being in the limelight, but then they don't do enough of the engagement. They don't participate in the community. They don't go into Slack, into the forum. They're not answering tickets. They're not reaching back out to people once they've met up with them and had a good experience talking about the technology, okay? The community piece is critical. If you don't have that, then you're going to struggle to build that authentic DevRel experience, okay? So it can't just be about content. It can't just be about speaking. It can't just be about performing. It's got to be the conversation too is really, really important, okay? All right, so this is what we've defined the value. We've defined what they do. Now, if you are a DevRel wannabe, you want to get into DevRel, or if there's a company who's looking to hire DevRel people, I'm going to tell you what I always recommend to companies in terms of what skills they should be looking for, okay? And we've got 5 here that I want to cover, okay? 4, 5, okay? The first is, I'm just checking my notes again, is that they understand the culture, okay? The culture of what a developer audience wants, okay? Now, I'm going to conquer a myth that some people think about DevRel. You don't have to be a developer to work in DevRel and to be really good at DevRel, okay? You need to understand the culture of developers and what they want and how they operate, okay? And understanding that developers write code is not enough. You need to understand kind of what developers are passionate about. Like, for example, developers love writing code and they love seeing the impact of their code running, and they love engaging in really authentic, elegant technical solutions. And most developers that I've ever met, they don't like a lot of the stuff that wraps around that. They don't enjoy testing. They don't enjoy writing documentation. They don't enjoy jumping through hoops when it comes to approvals. They don't necessarily enjoy dealing with the minutiae of what the design team wants and how that integrates with the product team. A lot of developers don't particularly enjoy certain project management methodologies, such as Agile. Developers really love writing code. They enjoy technical problem solving. They enjoy meeting and spending time with other developers and solving interesting technical problems. They enjoy certain art forms and culture and media and all kinds of different things. So understanding that culture is important. If you're interested in getting into DevRel, then go and spend time in a developer community. You can just go and loiter, in an online forum and just watch the conversation. Watch what people are interested in, watch what the challenges are, what they struggle with. That's really important, okay? Now, although you don't need to be a developer, you do need to be technical, okay? And I don't necessarily mean that you're writing assembly code and building operating system kernels, okay? But you need to understand the technology that you're dealing with, okay? If you're in DevRel and you're just talking about the value proposition of a piece of software, that will get you so far. But at some point, a developer is going to ask you a technical question. And ideally, you're going to be in a position where you can at least be able to understand the question, give them some kind of answer, and then point them in the direction of somebody who may be able to go in more depth, okay? So you don't need to understand the developer frameworks and all that level of detail, but you need to understand the purpose of the technology, what it solves, what value it brings, what pain points it solves, what roadblocks it's solving, all of those different pieces. It's important to know the lingo, the jargon, the frameworks, the issues, the challenges that developers are facing. That is really, really important. The good news is that there's so much information on the internet for how to do this that you can go and learn, okay? Now, 3, and this is really important, okay, is that you need to be a good storyteller, okay? You need to be able to weave a narrative. Going out there and talking about, this is our database, and these are the features in our database, and our features in our database are better than the features in that other crappy database, okay? It's not gonna cut it. People don't wanna hear spec sheets. People don't wanna hear lists of features. And one of the big misnomers that some people have with developers is developers are technical people, therefore they just want the technical details shared directly with them. That's bullshit, okay? I can guarantee you that. Developers are as receptive to stories as anybody else. Don't just talk about the value proposition for your project. Talk about what problem it solves, the impact that it's had on other people who've used it. Weave a story around it. Tell a story about an individual or a company or a use case where people can really understand and feel it, and incorporate tension into that story as well. This is so important, okay? I don't believe you can do DevRel effectively if you can't tell stories, okay? Now, you don't have to be, Stephen King, okay? You just need to be able to say, here's a narrative, a linear narrative that you weave into your content, into your evangelism. The very best DevRel people do that extremely well. And this is a skill that you constantly learn and improve with over time, okay? All right. Now, the other piece here, number 4, is being a good communicator, okay? Now, this is usually going to require a fairly decent level of communication across different mediums, okay? It's going to be, your evangelism is invariably going to be a good public speaker, someone who can get up in front of an audience and speak effectively and engagingly. and not just read bullet points of a slide, but it's also going to be a good writer, somebody who can create blog posts, someone who can create good social media messages, somebody who can create good emails, someone who can respond elegantly on a forum or on Slack and places like that. So you got to be a good communicator, and you can see that all of these are kind of weaved together, right? A good communicator will tell good stories. The stories will be technical in nature. The technical stories will be familiar with the norms of the culture of developers, okay? So this is all part of just being generally a good, elegant communicator outward in terms of engaging with the developer audience. And then the final one here is to be a problem solver. And again, I think this is a nuance, that there are some DevRel people I've worked with in my career where they'll be able to go out there and tell a great story and talk about all of the amazing benefits of using this particular tool and how it can solve your problems and how it's easy to use and the company gets you and your culture and all the rest of it. And all these things are great. But often some of those folks talk at a bit of an abstract level. They're not talking about real problems and how you solve real problems. The very best DevRel people I've ever worked with go out and they do a talk about something or they'll create a piece of content. Someone responds and says, hey, I've got this specific issue that I'm trying to figure out how to solve. Will your technology solve it? The DevRel person will follow up and not just say, sure, absolutely, but they'll point some documentation or some existing sample code or something along those lines, or they'll actually put together a short video on something such as Loom, where they kind of walk through exactly how to do it, but they'll fundamentally get them to solving that problem. And this is really important for one particular reason, is if you want to build a great audience, what people want are quick wins, okay? They want somebody to be able to give them some information and to help them to solve their problem as quickly as possible. I'm wondering whether you are watching this video because you're like, I don't really 100% know what DevRel is and where it fits into my world. And my hope is that all of this is now helping to solve your problem. It's helping to illuminate what wasn't illuminated before you watch the video. And we want to do the same thing with DevRel, is to make sure that those people are actively solving those problems, and then that's going to help those developers build a good relationship with you, okay? Now, one final point I just want to touch on is, where do they report, okay? There's been a tension in the world in the industry about whether DevRel people report into marketing or into engineering. Some DevRel people really don't want to report into marketing. I think that's kind of a little unfair, okay? If you've got a good marketing lead who understands developers and understands developer culture, reporting into marketing is no problem. In some companies, they report directly into engineering, and that can work well as well, so long as that engineering team understands the role of DevRel. So it really depends on the understanding of the person that person's reporting into. This is a whole separate video that I'm probably going to put something out about to dig into, but I just wanted to cover that briefly before I wrapped up. All right, so if that was useful, be sure to hit that like button, because I like the like button. You should like the like button. And when you like the like button, then my videos get recommended to people, and I quite like that. All right. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button and, of course, that little notification bell to get notified of when new videos come out. And I will see you in the next one. Peace out.